Have you ever wondered how much heat you can get from a single tree? I mean, if you're going to plant a woodland to be self-sufficient in firewood with beech or willow or oak, how much land do you actually need to plant up? Let's find out. I showed you this tree in a previous video. It got blown down about a year ago in a storm, and it's about 40 centimeters across. And I was thinking, how much wood do you get from a fairly big tree like this? How big of a stack of firewood does it make? It makes this much. Let's get it cut up and stacked so you can measure it properly. Alright, so that's the first trailer load. We're going to put it here in front of that wood stack, so we're keeping it separate to be easier to measure how much wood we get from this one tree. Alright, so trailer load number 2. Trailer load number 3. Alright, so this is the fourth and final trailer load. I think it's about 3/4 full. Now we need to get it all stacked up so we can measure it. Now fortunately, Emma loves stacking firewood because it looks great. I would just chuck it into a great big heap because I hate stacking this stuff. But let's get on with it. And this is what it looks like stacked. Now we'll come back in a bit and discuss how big this is and how much heat it contains. But I wanted to show you, we even got down to sticks this size to make sure that we had all the usable firewood from that tree. So this is the pile of brash, as it's called in Britain, all these twigs that aren't useful as firewood. We could then cut them all into firewood, but I thought they were a bit too small. We do have standards to maintain. For us to be self-sufficient in firewood, we need to think about how much land we need to plant as a woodland, and also what species should we use. Should it all be willow? Maybe we should think about oak and beech as well, so we can get the maximum value from our woodland. Willow are known for their fast growth, and this one has done quite well. Now it's still fairly rough from the chainsaw cutting it, so the rings are kind of hard to see, but I think I've counted 22. I brought a plane out to see if I could smooth the top of this stump and make it easier to see the rings. Let's give it a go. So here on this stump you can see these deep gouges from the chainsaw cutters. Look at these growth rings, so you can see how tight they were when it was young up to maybe when it was 5 or 6 years old. Probably because it was being browsed by deer. We don't know if it had a tree tube on it or not, and also competition with the grass for nutrients and sunlight. But once the roots got in, it was off. And you can see here the growth rings about 1 centimeter wide. It's really going for it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 growth rings. Now one of the reasons why this willow tree is doing so well is it's right here next to the stream. You can probably hear it. Willow trees love water. Now this is a goat willow, Salix caprea. It's one of our native willow trees here in the UK. Now the willows we're growing for firewood are hybrids. They grow even faster. I'll have a look in a minute. Hazel, come on. Now, of course, the absolute best way to grow a sustainable supply of firewood is through coppicing. Regular viewers of this channel will know that I'm obsessed with coppicing. This is where you cut a tree to the ground. It then creates new branches from the dormant buds in the roots and the stem. All of this is, in fact, the same tree. You then let it grow for as long as you need to give you the thickness of wood that you want. But not all trees coppice equally well. Let me go show you one that didn't coppice well at all. One of the reasons we like willow so much for firewood is because it coppices so well. The coppicing in mature trees often doesn't work. They just don't regrow properly. Let me show you. On this tree you can see the branches are grown from the cambium layer. It's the actual living part of the tree that's directly under the bark. It's where the wood grows from. The trouble is when they grow from here, they're not attached properly to the rest of the tree, and they're weak and they'll break off if they get snow on them or heavy winds. It's not a good thing for a tree to do. Let's go back and have a look at that goat willow to see if its branches are grown properly. These branches are growing out of the main trunk like they should, so this should work quite well. The main part here, this stump, very likely will rot away. Now that's not a problem. I mean, the middle of the tree's dead anyway, and plenty of trees have hollow middles and they carry on just fine. So this tree should last a long time yet. I get a lot of comments from people telling me that willow is a very poor choice for firewood and we should be burning something like oak or beech. Well, they're right. but that's solving the wrong problem. The problem we're trying to solve is how do we grow the most heat per acre per year in our bit of the world? If you're buying your firewood or you already have a mature woodland, you might choose to burn some sort of hardwood. But if your situation is like ours and you're starting with a grassy field, that's a different situation. In a previous video, I put forward the idea that willow is the best firewood in the world, and we have planted thousands of them. But let's go back and have a look at that goat willow, talk numbers, and see how things stack up. In the UK, there is no standardized system of talking about sizes of firewood. In North America, the Americans and the Canadians both use the cord system. That's 128 cubic feet, usually 8 foot long by 4 foot tall by 4 foot deep, stacked pile of wood. In Britain, I tend to use cubic meters, being 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. Now, all of this goat willow turned into about 35 cubic feet, or 0.28 cords, or almost exactly 1 cubic meter. All right, that's useful, but the real question is, how much heat is there in this? Willow has about 1,200 kilowatt hours of heat in it per cubic meter. That's pretty good, but hardwoods can have double that. I'll include a link in the description below for a chart showing the different amounts of heat you can get from different volumes of wood. Interestingly, the one at the top is a tree called live oak. It's one I'm very familiar with. It was a very common tree in Texas where I grew up. But bear in mind, all these are for volume, not weight, because of course by weight, all woods are almost identical. The average house in the UK uses about 11,500 kilowatt hours of heat per year, or 440 kilowatt hours of heat per week. That's just an average. Your house might be different, but assuming you heat your house for about 6 months, this cubic meter of goat willow would heat your home for about 2 or 3 weeks. Now, if you think about it, that's kind of interesting. It took 22 years to grow 3 weeks of heat. That's a lot of growing. But then again, you wouldn't grow goat willow deliberately as firewood. It is a short and shrubby sort of a tree. That's why we're growing hybrids. So let's talk about oak. Why don't we grow this lovely tree for firewood? It certainly has an awful lot more heat in it per cubic meter. It's about 2,000 kilowatt hours of heat compared to the 1,200 you get in the willow. Well, the problem is its slow growth rate. That goat willow we saw that took 22 years to grow gave us about a cubic meter or 2 or 3 weeks worth of heat. This tree, as you can see, is an awful lot smaller. If we cut this down, we're not going to, but if we did cut this tree down, it would be about 0.1 of a cubic meter. It'd keep us warm for a day. Because of this slow growth rate, you're also going to therefore require an awful lot more land. Now, a hybrid willow will give you roughly 4 dry tons of wood per acre per year. Now, an acre, by the way, is roughly the size of an American football field or half of a rugby pitch. Oak, on the other hand, will give you about 1 cubic meter of firewood per year per acre, so it's an awful lot less. Now, the idea with coppicing willow is that you take your acre of land, you divide it up into about 5 different sections, and you'd cut 1 section each year, and you then just work your way around. By the time you got back around to the beginning, they would have grown enough to be cut for firewood. To do that with oak, though, you're going to need 4 times the land, but it's even worse than that. It took 22 years for this tree to get to be the size you might call firewood. But with willow, you can do that in just a couple of years, but you're going to have to be cold for 22 years while you wait for your oak trees to get big enough to burn. That's a long time to be cold. Oaks are fantastic trees. We planted hundreds of them, and this is going to be a gorgeous oak woodland in a couple of decades. Trouble is, they grow fairly slowly. This little guy is 4 years old. It was 45 centimeters when we bought him, and now up to about 90. So while they're fantastic trees, you do have to have a lot of patience. This willow is also 4 years old. You can see it doesn't compare to the oak in the slightest. It's about 100 mils at the base and about 7 meters tall, so there's a decent amount of wood even after 4 years. Now, we're not entirely sure what kind of hybrid this is, some sort of viminalis. My father-in-law cut it for my mother-in-law because it makes these lovely pussy willow branches for decorations. They stuck it in a vase at home and grew roots, and they stuck it in their garden, and we got cuttings of it for here. Let's go and have a look at some 2-year-old hybrids. This 2-year-old tree is a hybrid. It is a cross between Salix viminalis and Salix triandra. It is about 25 mils diameter at the base and about, 2.5 meters tall. Not bad going, way better than the oak, which is 4 years old and only about as big as this single branch. But there is a way to supercharge these things. This tree has been supercharged. by coppicing it. I cut it to the ground 2 years ago, so this is just 2 years growth. I cut it down to supply the trees we have in the field that I just showed you. In fact, this could be the mother plant of the one I just showed you. Each branch here is about 50 mils in diameter, and it's all about 4 meters tall. On this tree, you've got sort of 5 or 6 branches of that size, plus loads of smaller ones. It's a phenomenal amount of growth. Now, if it continues to grow at that kind of size, then in about another 5 years, we should be able to harvest 150 mil firewood. This tree over here is doing the same. This is the stuff from my father-in-law, and you can see it's growing at an amazing rate as well. Not quite as fast, but really, really good. Now, our hope is also that as the trees get big and they grow more, the leaves will come together and it'll cause enough shade to suppress all the grass and other weeds. That'll mean that it grows even faster. We hope, be able to get the harvest cycle down to about 5 years between cuts. Beech is another popular choice for firewood. It gives off almost the same amount of heat as oak does. It can also be coppiced like oak and willow. Trouble is, it grows about as fast or slowly as oak does, and there's not a chance we're cutting down this lovely tree. One tree that we thought we would grow an awful lot of is this. It's ash. For the 30 or so years that my wife and I dreamed about having a bit of our own land, we really thought that ash would be the mainstay of our firewood, being a very fast growing hardwood. Not as fast as willow, but much faster than oak. Problem is, we live in a place that has ash dieback disease. It's a fungus that gets into the branches, travels down the branches, into the trunk, and eventually kills the tree. Young trees are especially susceptible to it. You can see these young trees are all dead or dying. It's very, very sad. Now, in a bid to protect the trees we have, we've monolithed them. This means you take off all the large branches, which hopefully removes all of the diseased material on the tree and allows it to continue growing. Now, you can see these new branches that are grown. They're more than 2 meters long, some of them. So you can see the kind of fast growth rate you can get on this tree. Now, there are some ash trees that seem to have some resistance, and I think maybe one of ours is one of those. Let's go and have a look at it. This ash tree seems to be resistant to ash dieback. Unfortunately, it's male, so it won't have any... You nearly fell over. This ash tree seems to have a lot of resistance to ash dieback disease, which is fantastic. Unfortunately, it is male, so it won't produce any seeds, so we need to propagate it through cuttings. I'll show you how to do that this winter. We started off with 2 questions. How much heat is there in a tree, and how much land do you need to be self-sufficient in firewood? To answer the first question, it depends on what tree. If you cut down an oak tree that's about 20 years old from the middle of a woodland, you'll keep warm for about a day. If you cut down a 20-year-old goat willow from the middle of a field, you might keep warm for a couple of weeks. So what does that look like in terms of land space? Well, if you grow a willow hybrid, you can do it on a single acre of land. It'll take about 10 years for it to be big enough and properly established, and you're cutting every 5 years. If you'd like to grow oak, you'll need to have about 4 acres and wait about 20 years for your first cut and then replant. Depends on how patient you are. So let me know, what kind of firewood would you grow to keep warm in your neck of the woods? Thank you for watching.